A major story in Harrisburg impacting thousands of people right here in the Pittsburgh area. Republicans refusing to swear in Senator Jim Brewster, who was just reelected to represent Allegheny County and Westmoreland counties because his challenger is contesting the results of the election. And that refusal prompted chaos on the Senate floor today.
This is about Pennsylvania. It's not Democrats or Republicans. It's not about simply winning. It's about protecting our democracy.
That was Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman absolutely livid after Senator Brewster was not sworn in. Republicans actually removed Fetterman from presiding over the session when he insisted Brewster be seated. So where does this leave us now? Can the Senate just leave thousands of constituents without representation until they sort this out? Channel 11's Amy Hudak is with us again, getting those answers.
This is about Pennsylvania. It's not Democrats or Republicans. It's not about simply winning. It's about protecting our democracy.
It started with a surprise move. Republican senators agreeing to unseat Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, who's the president of the Senate.
It is inappropriate to do such. We will not participate in this farce.
With Republicans now in control of the session, they blocked Democrat Jim Brewster from being sworn in. Brewster, who represents parts of Allegheny and Westmoreland counties, narrowly won re-election by 67 votes. Those results certified by the Secretary of the Commonwealth. Senator Camera Bartolotta, who represents parts of Beaver, Washington, and Olive Green counties, joined her colleagues. She tells Channel 11 mail-in ballots could sway who won the 45th district.
We're going to let the courts decide who has, won that seat. We're not going to disenfranchise voters in Westmoreland County, which is another county included in District 45, and allow illegal votes to be counted in Allegheny County.
We talked to the lieutenant governor right after the heated scene on the Senate floor.
You can't have one political party, either Democrats or Republicans, deciding, well, I don't like this election result, so I'm not going to seat someone who was certified.
Fetterman says what GOP senators pulled is undemocratic.
We don't have a state senator, and everyone was treated to an unfortunate vignette that is emblematic of the current state of affairs in politics here. And can't question an outcome of an election simply because you don't like the outcome.
The GOP is assuring voters a court will decide and they'll respect that outcome.
I want to assure people watching that the constituents in that district, District 45, they're still being represented. And this process will not take a long time.
Amy Hudak, Channel 11 News.